As promised, now we cross over to Ayanda Nyati, who's somewhere in the building now and joins us for another conversation. So Ayanda, you are on the quest to essentially find out how all these 75 years have gone, but to also understand how the journey has been, where it's at now and where it's going.
Absolutely. We come to this building every day, and today in particular, I feel like I'm traveling through time and space, given just how much of an evolution has happened insofar as the technology we use every day is concerned. And I'm still stunned. We're told that you and I have it a whole lot easier today than it was perhaps 7 decades ago. But in just a moment, we'll get you a sense of what putting together this broadcast actually looks like and how all of that has changed over the years. We're still at our Auckland Park headquarters, which, if you ask me, could very well be a museum, given just how much history is steeped into the brick and mortar that make up the buildings that we continuously walk through for the past 7.5 decades, at least different aspects of it. Where I'm standing is not too far from our studios, in fact, a couple levels down. I heard just a short moment ago that this used to be a coffee shop. Can't smell any coffee now, but I can tell you there is so much more to take in insofar as telling the SABC story, which is really the South African story. So let's jump straight into it. There's a bit of an exhibition taking place here at the foyer. A short while ago, there were a number of reflections from some key figures, let's call them, who've been part of the SABC over the years. We'll tell you a bit more about what you're seeing in front of you in just a moment as we take stock once again of what it actually takes to put these together. So let's jump straight into it. We'll bring in Malusi Ntanzi. He's news manager for the video journalists department and is with us now before we speak about what's behind us. It's lovely to see you as we continue marking this incredible milestone as the SABC News division. And I'll just start off with your own reflections. What people take for granted is how much teamwork pulling this off actually takes. I mean, often we take the shine as people on screen, but there are people behind the lens. Even now, Neo is handling this camera, who are such an integral part of telling the story successfully.
Thank you, Honda. Thank you for having us. Look, I think you hit the nail on the head there because, look, ours is a good story to tell, and especially this 75 years is a good story to tell. And it's a journey of the collective. People that you could refer to as the unsung heroes, people that bring you the news that matter to you. So it's one of those that we are behind the scenes, of course, but it's a lot that goes in there because we decide for millions of viewers, this is what we want you to see at this particular angle. And if we miss it, the whole world will miss it too. Of course, technology has evolved that now we've got cell phones. Everyone can just use their cell phones to get the footage. But before, there was a heavy reliance on us that we could not drop the ball. We had to make sure that we bring it back home, and especially for the benefit of the entire populace.
Yeah, and in many instances, you need to make a call about which camera goes to where, at what time, etc., what breeds into the story. But I want to do a whole lot more showing as we continue telling you the story. So now, if you can come along, Malusi, if you can perhaps help us speak a bit more about what's on show here as part of this exhibition. I've said a short while ago that the camera, the mic I'm using, the camera we're using now has changed over time, or perhaps we'll start with the cameras themselves. When I spoke to Kuto in the previous hour, he spoke about how heavy the equipment used to be, and I suppose you can see it with the naked eye here.
Yes, what we're seeing on display here is the evolution of technology, especially when it comes to cameras and the playback machines, of course the tapes that we used, that our archives colleagues have put together. So clearly, big is not necessarily king anymore. Yeah. We used to, of course, believe that if it's big, then it can definitely do the job. So it has evolved over time. We used to, studying here, we used to have this beta cam. I was fortunate that I was part of the group that started right at the tail end of the apartheid era, and when the technology was also moving and evolving and improving, and all the time we started with these big ones where it was tape based. It's called beta cam, and those ones were quite heavy. Was quite heavy, and you can imagine to carry this, and especially my colleague there, Mpumi, you can just look at the frame of a body. So it was quite taxing to have that. And then, of course, we moved right along, and then there was this era of DVC Pro tape. It was still tape-based, but they were starting to introduce the digital aspect of it, because it was not analog, but it was more on the transition to the digital world. But it was still tape-based, but it was not HD yet. It was just all standard definition. And then we moved to the XD cam. That is when the actual quantum leap that was taken in terms of the technology advancement, that it was introduced with this, because we were going more digital. I was also fortunate that I got this when I was also assigned a piecemeal outside base, which I was based in Senegal for quite a number of years. But this was quite heavy and taxing when you travel through the continent and all of that. But then, fortunately, then they introduced these ones, which was the DV cams, and also there's another one which is the sister of a DVC Pro, the P200, which was much smaller, but it was sort of an improvement from what we had in terms of weight, in terms of being the agility, in terms of everything else. And then these what we're seeing here is a laptop editor. We had the LT75s and the 85s. Well, I got in here, it was an 85.
And what do you use this for? I mean, I was told earlier that you guys used to carry this to stories.
Yes, we used to travel with this. It was mostly used for the overseas assignments, but of course locally as well when you are assigned outside base. So it was tape-based. The problems or the challenges with tapes is that they would deteriorate faster, and of course they would have drop heads, and that is why sometimes when you see the digitized versions of this, that it's got dropouts in terms of the heads being dirty and all of that. That is why the improvement in the technology around this was quite necessary. So this was a laptop editor that we had to use, but of course it was not as easy as nowadays, where you just shoot, edit, and you ingest. You just send via internet, or what we call the FTP, which is file transfer protocol. That is easier. Here we still had to booked in one of the agencies like Reuters and everything else. It was quite a logistical nightmare, but you still had to go to any of the other broadcasts in the world, and you still needed to feed manually. So the turnaround time was quite compromised, but now it's all in the snap of the finger.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're moving on to what Neo is actually carrying in some ways. And Neo, by the way, is our video journalist currently helping us tell the story about video journalists. So here you are, if you can keep up. But we often speak about people switching on their live views. This is what it looks like. It almost is, I don't know, the engine of the camera. I don't know if that's even accurate.
Well, for a layman, yes, it is. But of course, we'll give a different explanation around it. But of course, you are right. This is a live view. It's called a cellular bonded unit. Okay. I'm sure Mr. Matlala, our head, did touch on it in terms of how we got in here. And it's much simpler. It is much more agile. It is much more quicker, because it is based on a cellular network, so it's bonded. So you'd have multiple SIM cards here, together with a few interfaces like your Wi-Fi, your Ethernet, and everything bonded together. Hence, we say it's a cellular bonded unit, and the quality is as good as that one of the satellite. Wow. But of course, we are agile with it. We can move anywhere with it, so this is the first generation of live view. Of course, they don't make these anymore because of a lot of things, firmware updates and all of that. But we've got the later ones, which are much smaller, more compact. You can run with them, do a march, do a protest, and anything else without feeling anything in your shoulders. So it is one of those.
Speaking of marches and protests, these are the different mics that we've used over the years. But I want to also just hone in on this. It's such a hard helmet, for lack of a better term. And if you can see there's a very clearly marked media label on it. This is, I suppose, some of the protective gear that your video journalists use during the protests and so many of the turbulent moments we've covered even in this country.
Yes, so from time to time we will have those kinds of assignments where we assign people to those quite volatile areas where anything can happen. And it's important that we have our colleagues, which are our biggest assets, protected. against any harm that could have been caused by anything or catching a stray bullet. So we've got this as part of the protective gear that we have. It is paramount to have this in an organization like ours. But of course, it's not many that we have these days because of the democracy in terms of how we've moved so far. But before, you can imagine how handy these ones were. And especially, I mean, it predates us, those times predate us, but you can imagine that they were so needed. And I'm assuming that they also had them. But we do have these. They're a bit heavy, but of course, they do the job.
Yeah. Very quickly, if you can see the mic I'm using now, you know, it's quite nice, sleek, kind of designed, fresh. It wasn't always like this, as you know. And these are the different kind of mics that have been used over the years. The SABC brand has evolved over time, and I suppose that's also reflected in these kind of mics. But I can't help but notice they're differently shaped as well.
Yeah, the shape is to accommodate the type of microphone that you use. You've got the directional mics, which are for certain instances. The technical people would know when to use them and in what environment. And we've got the omnidirectional, which is the RE50s, that just like the one that you're using now. But of course, this is an RF. And RF mics is a radio frequency. It's much more simpler. You can move around here without the cable and all of that. So those are the innovations that came over time to saying that let's also have the RF mics, for instance, so that Ayanda can be able to do whatever that he wants to, because I know you can pull a few acrobats, Ayanda. So it's one of those. So, but of course, then the colors as well. Yeah. They were in line with the branding of the time, the taglines of the time. I remember this one is quite old. You can see it's been through World War I and II. But this used to be a green revolution. As those who've been here long enough would remember that green revolution. So this was used by then, and then it was followed by this one when the branding changed, the blue one. And then now we're on the black one, which is part of our CI guidelines and our marketing and PR strategy. Yeah.
All right, Malusi, thanks very much indeed. It's so much to take in about the history of where we come from, but it would be remiss of us not to speak to a pioneering video journalist who's also here. And, you know, often people don't know, but we have to fight to get some of the camera operators to come in front of the camera. They'll tell you that they're behind the lens for a particular reason. Nompumelelo Shope, you, my dear, could not escape being on TV today. And I think it's important to speak about your own role over the past couple of years. I mean, you are the first female video journalist for the SABC, and that must have come with a lot of pressure.
Yes, thanks, Ayanda. It did, and I had to make sure that I don't fail, because if I had failed, it would have meant people like Neo, my colleague Neo, a video journalist behind the camera right now, would have not had a chance to take on the career that she is doing right now. As Malusi said, we started with this big camera. It was heavy. It was really heavy that I had to psych myself when going to sleep at night to say, I will do it, I won't fail. Because if I fail, it means I've failed every other girl child that will come after me. So fortunately, technology evolved and things got smaller as we went along. So, yes.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. And Nompumelelo, the rest of the team have carried the weight quite literally and figuratively over the decades, telling stories not only in this country, but certainly around the world as well. If only I had 75 years to tell you about everything else that we're seeing.